They say a man's greatest strength is his ability to stay calm in the face of betrayal. I used to think that was just some nonsense people said to sound wise. That was before I found out my wife was cheating on me. And instead of rage, instead of heartbreak, I felt something entirely different. Amusement. Not the laugh-out-loud kind. The kind that comes when you realize you're watching someone unknowingly walk into a trap, one they built with their own hands. Because here's the thing, Ashley thought she was outsmarting me. She thought she had it all figured out, juggling a husband, 2 kids, and her secret little affair like some kind of twisted circus act. She assumed I was oblivious, that I was just another fool living in blissful ignorance. That was her first mistake. The second? Underestimating just how much I could control a situation without her ever realizing it. I wasn't the kind of man to lose my mind over an affair. No yelling, no tears, no dramatic confrontations. That's what she expected, what most men do when they find out. But I wasn't most men. The moment I saw the first undeniable proof, my mind didn't go to why she did it. It went to how I was going to make her regret it. Not in a petty, surface-level way. No, that wasn't my style. I was going to let her destroy herself slowly, meticulously, without her ever realizing I was behind it. It started with a small detail, the kind that would go unnoticed by anyone who wasn't paying attention. A text message that flashed across her screen while she was in the shower. Nothing obvious, just an initial and a little too much enthusiasm in the way it was written. Some men might have ignored it. I didn't. I remembered it. Logged it. And when she came back, I played dumb, made small talk, kissed her on the forehead like any loving husband would. That night, when she was asleep, I didn't check her phone. That's what amateurs do. Instead, I planted a tiny doubt in her mind the next morning. Casually mentioned how weird it is that people text at odd hours. A simple remark, just enough to make her hesitate. And she did. I saw it in the way she briefly stiffened before laughing it off. That was all the confirmation I needed. Over the next few weeks, I became the perfect husband. More attentive, more romantic, more present. And she? She fell right into the pattern I was setting for her. When a woman is cheating, she expects distance, suspicion, fights. But when her husband suddenly becomes even better than before, it does something to her mind. It makes her complacent. She started feeling safe. That was the opening I needed. I began piecing it together, not just the affair itself, but everything around it. His name, where they met, how often. Every detail I uncovered, I stored away, not for confrontation, but for construction. I was building something she wouldn't see coming. A future where she had no one to blame but herself when everything came crashing down. Then came the real turning point. The day I sat down at the dinner table with our 2 kids, and Ashley was running late. She blamed traffic, her usual excuse. But this time, I had already tracked her car. I knew exactly where she had been. And instead of anger, I just smiled. I helped the kids with their homework, listened to their stories about school, and played the role of the ever-present father. When she walked in, slightly breathless, throwing a half-hearted apology my way, I simply kissed her cheek and asked, "Busy day?" The guilt in her eyes was microscopic, almost imperceptible. But I saw it, and I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to sink into the comfort of believing she was getting away with it. Because the deeper she sank, the harder the fall would be. She had no idea that I had already set everything in motion. That every time she snuck away to be with him, I was ensuring that everyone else in her life saw me as the perfect husband, the devoted father, the man who would never, ever betray his family. The contrast would be devastating when the truth finally came out. And it would come out at the perfect moment, in the perfect way, leaving her with no defense, no sympathy, no way out. She thought she was living a double life. What she didn't realize was that I was already rewriting the script of her downfall. And the best part? She had no idea. If someone had asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have used one word: stable. Not perfect, not extraordinary, just stable. And I liked it that way. My mornings started predictably, waking up to the soft glow of sunlight creeping through the blinds, the distant sound of birds chirping, and the familiar weight of Ashley's body beside me. I'd roll out of bed, careful not to wake her, and head downstairs to make coffee, a quiet ritual before the chaos of the day began. The smell of freshly brewed espresso would fill the kitchen, mixing with the faint scent of her vanilla-scented candles. If I close my eyes now, I can still remember it. Back then, it felt like home. Our routine was simple, comfortable. We were the kind of couple people envied, not because we were flashy or dramatic, but because we made marriage look effortless. I had a steady job in finance, nothing glamorous, but enough to keep us living well. Ashley worked part-time at a small interior design firm, something she did more for passion than necessity. Between work, the kids' school runs, and weekend family outings, life moved at an even, predictable pace. A suburban dream. There were date nights every Friday, where we'd go to our favorite Italian restaurant, share a bottle of wine, and talk about everything and nothing. She'd laugh at my bad jokes, reach across the table to squeeze my hand, and tell me how lucky she felt. And I believed her. There was never a reason not to. I had built this life with her, piece by piece, moment by moment, never once questioning whether she was truly in it with me. But now, when I look back, I see the cracks. The things I brushed off. The subtle changes that seemed too small to matter at the time. Like how she started checking her phone more often but always kept it face down. Or how she'd hum absent-mindedly when cooking, but one day, out of nowhere, she stopped. I remember the way she used to playfully complain about the mess our kids left in the living room, only to turn around and build pillow forts with them anyway. Then, one day, she just stopped doing that too. I see it all now, the slow erosion of little habits, the micro-expressions I ignored, the faint hesitation before answering simple questions. Like the time I asked if she wanted to take a weekend trip, just the two of us. A year ago, she would have jumped at the idea, planned out the whole thing within an hour. But this time, she hesitated. She smiled too forced, too rehearsed, and said, maybe next month. Work's been crazy. And I didn't question it. I just nodded and told myself we'd find the time later. I even remember the first time she came home wearing perfume I didn't recognize. It was expensive, floral, something I would have bought her for an anniversary. I asked about it, half joking, and she said a client gifted it to her after a project. I had no reason to doubt her. It was such a small, insignificant thing. But that's how betrayal works, doesn't it? It doesn't come crashing down in one dramatic moment. It creeps in, quiet and unassuming, disguising itself as ordinary changes until, one day, you realize everything familiar has been slowly replaced by something you no longer recognize. I used to love our Sunday mornings the most. Those were the slow days, the ones that felt suspended in time. I'd make breakfast while the kids watched cartoons, and Ashley would sit at the counter with a cup of coffee, flipping through a magazine. Sometimes, she'd glance up and smile, that soft, knowing smile that made me feel like we were still the same young couple who fell in love before life got busy. Now I wonder if she was smiling at me, or at the secret she was keeping. It's funny how memory works. When you think your world is whole, you see the past as a warm collection of moments, untainted and pure. But when the illusion shatters, those same moments take on a different hue. They become evidence. Clues you were too blind to see at the time. Every conversation replays with new meaning, every kiss, every touch, every glance. Suddenly, you're analyzing the moments that once brought you comfort, looking for the lies hidden within them. That's the part no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt because of the act itself. It hurts because it forces you to rewrite your past, to question the very foundation of the life you thought you had. And as much as I wanted to cling to the good memories, I knew I couldn't. Because those memories belonged to a man who didn't know the truth. And I was no longer that man. It started with something small. It always does. That night, Ashley was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, when her phone buzzed on the counter. Just once. A short, clipped vibration, too brief to be a call, too deliberate to be spam. I wouldn't have even noticed it if it weren't for the way she reacted. She froze for half a second, just long enough for me to register that something was off. Then, as if nothing happened, she casually reached for the phone, flipped it over, and took a slow sip of her wine. Too slow. Too controlled. Something in my gut tightened. Who was that? I asked, keeping my voice light, casual. She didn't look up. Oh, just Sarah. She's planning another girls' night. A lie. Not because I had any proof yet, but because I knew Ashley. She always smiled when she talked about her friends, always exaggerated her annoyance with Sarah's party planning. But now? Nothing. Just a flat, rehearsed response, like she was reading from a script she hadn't quite memorized. I didn't press. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I watched how she took another sip of wine before setting the glass down in the exact same spot as always. I watched how she reached for her phone, glanced at the screen for a fraction of a second, then locked it again without responding. And I watched how, 10 minutes later, she suddenly remembered she needed to grab something from the car, her excuse to step outside, just far enough away for a private call. She thought I didn't notice. I did. Later that night, lying in bed beside her, I replayed the moment in my head. Could I have been overthinking it? Maybe. But instincts are a funny thing. They whisper in the back of your mind, nudging you towards something you can't quite see yet. And my instincts were telling me that Ashley had just told her first real lie. The next few days were normal. Almost too normal. She laughed at the kids' jokes, kissed me goodbye in the mornings, sent me texts during lunch about some new recipe she wanted to try. On the surface, nothing had changed. But I knew better. It wasn't what she was doing, it was what she wasn't doing. She wasn't leaving her phone on the counter anymore. She wasn't complaining about her coworkers like she usually did. And she wasn't looking me in the eyes the way she used to. Then came the second moment. The one that turned suspicion into something heavier. It was a Wednesday evening. I had just gotten home from work, loosening my tie as I stepped inside, expecting the usual routine, dinner, kids doing homework, Ashley asking about my day. Instead, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with her laptop, eyes focused on the screen. But the second I walked in, she closed it. Not minimized. Not switched tabs. Closed. "Hey," she said, voice too bright, too cheerful. "You're home early." I wasn't. I glanced at the laptop, at the way her fingers hovered over it like she was debating whether to open it again. "What were you watching?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She hesitated. Again, just for half a second. Just some random videos. You know, those deep dive documentaries on crime cases. She wasn't lying about the videos. I could still hear the muffled sound of a paused YouTube clip. But Ashley never watched true crime. She hated it. Said it was depressing. And yet, here she was, claiming that's what she had been doing. I didn't push. Not yet. Instead, I leaned in, kissed her on the forehead, and said, "I'll go check on the kids." Her shoulders relaxed. That was all the confirmation I needed. That night, after she fell asleep, I went downstairs, grabbed her laptop, and powered it on. I knew she wouldn't be foolish enough to leave anything obvious, but I wasn't looking for texts or emails. I was looking for browser history. Sure enough, she had cleared it. Ashley never cleared her history. That was the moment. The first real crack in the illusion. I sat there in the dim glow of the screen, staring at the blank search history, feeling the weight of what it meant. This wasn't just a bad feeling anymore. This was deliberate secrecy. And the thing about secrecy? It only exists when there's something to hide. I shut the laptop and leaned back, exhaling slowly. I wasn't going to ask her about it. I wasn't going to start a fight over something that, by itself, could still be explained away. No, I was going to do something much better. I was going to wait. I was going to watch. And when the time was right, I was going to make sure she regretted every single lie she ever told me. There's a shift that happens when you stop suspecting and start knowing. It's like stepping into a new reality, one where everything you see is a potential clue, every word spoken is a test, and every action has an underlying motive. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. Those emotions belonged to a man who still believed his wife was loyal. I was no longer that man. I was something sharper, colder, calculating. Ashley thought she was being careful. She had no idea she was playing a game with someone who had already decided to let her win, just long enough for her to fall into the exact position I needed her in. The first thing I noticed was the change in her phone habits. It didn't leave her side anymore. Even in our own house, she carried it with her, setting its screen down on the table, slipping it into her pocket when she got up. I tested it once. During dinner, I casually reached for it, pretending to move it aside to make space for a dish. The way her hand shot out, the way she forced a laugh, brushing it off with a fake excuse about work messages, told me everything I needed to know. Then, there were the passwords. Ashley and I had never been the couple who hid things. Our devices were always open, our emails accessible. It had never been an issue until now. One night, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her laptop again. This time, when I tried logging into her email, the familiar password we had both used for years didn't work. Changed. I tried her social media. Changed. Even her cloud storage changed. I didn't need to see what was inside to know what that meant. People only lock doors when they have something worth hiding. I let it go. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't ready for her to know I was watching. Letting her feel safe was part of the plan. If she thought I was still in the dark, she'd be reckless. And I needed her to be reckless. So, I played along. I asked the usual questions, watched her carefully as she answered. "How was your day? Did you have lunch with anyone? Busy at work?" Simple, innocent questions. But it wasn't her answers that mattered. It was how she gave them. One evening, I casually asked if she had plans for the weekend. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she smiled. Sarah and I might go shopping. Sarah again. The ever-reliable alibi. I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. That's nice. You should send me pictures if you see anything interesting. She smiled again, too quick, too eager to move past the conversation. Yeah, sure. It was a lie. I knew it, but I didn't need to call her out on it. I just needed to know where she was really going. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I took her car keys before she woke up, stepped into the garage, and checked the GPS history in her dashboard system. Most people don't think about it. They delete texts, clear browser history, change passwords. But cars? Cars remember. A few locations popped up, our usual places. The grocery store, the kids' school, the gym. But then, there was another one. A location 20 minutes away. A place I had never heard her mention. I memorized the address. Put her keys back exactly where I found them. And waited. That Friday, she dressed up just a little more than usual. Nothing obvious, just a little extra effort. A nicer blouse, a touch more perfume. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was different, but I caught the way she glanced at her phone one last time before she left. I waited exactly 10 minutes. Then, I got into my car and followed. She didn't go to the mall. She didn't go anywhere near it. Instead, she drove straight to the location I had seen in the GPS history. A quiet residential street. I parked a few houses away, just out of sight, and watched as she pulled into the driveway of an unfamiliar home. The front door opened before she even stepped out of the car. A man stood there. Mid-40s. Well-dressed. Too comfortable, too familiar. She smiled at him. The kind of smile she used to give me. She walked inside. The door closed behind her. I didn't move. Didn't react. Just sat there, watching the house, watching the seconds tick by on the dashboard clock. The truth wasn't a question anymore. It was right in front of me. But I didn't feel the explosion of anger most men would feel. No blind rage. No heartbreak. Just a cold, calculating clarity. She thought she was in control of her double life. She had no idea that I had just stepped into the game. And I never lost. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had expected this moment, prepared for it, even, but nothing prepares you for seeing your wife walk into another man's house like she belongs there. Like it's routine. Like it's normal. Time slowed. My heartbeat was steady, my breathing controlled, but my mind burned with a sharp, cold fury. I wasn't naive enough to tell myself she was just visiting a friend. The way she smiled at him, the way he stood in the doorway like he was expecting her, the way she disappeared inside without hesitation, it told me everything I needed to know. I didn't move. I didn't storm out of the car like some fool ready to cause a scene. That wasn't my style. That wasn't how you win. No. I sat there, letting the image burn itself into my memory, etching every single detail into my mind. Every second that passed was a hammer driving a nail into the coffin of the life I thought I had. 30 minutes. 40. Nearly an hour. Then, finally, the door opened again. She stepped out first, smoothing down her blouse, running a hand through her hair. A habit she had when she was trying to make herself look put together. As if she hadn't just spent an hour betraying everything we built. The man followed her to the car. Said something. She laughed. Laughed. That was when something inside me shifted. Not into rage, not into despair, into something much deadlier. Purpose. I needed proof. Something concrete. Something she couldn't twist, couldn't explain away with a well-practiced lie. Watching them wasn't enough. Seeing it with my own eyes wasn't enough. So I waited. As soon as she drove off, I stepped out of my car, pulled out my phone, and snapped a few quick photos of the house, the address, the license plate of the man's car. Then, I walked up to the front door and knocked. The seconds stretched. Then, the door cracked open. The man stood there, confusion flickering across his face. Can I help you? I smiled. Not friendly. Not aggressive. Just enough to make him uneasy. Yeah, you already did. I turned and walked away before he could respond. That night, Ashley came home as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, greeted the kids, laughed at something on TV. The audacity of it was almost impressive. But I didn't confront her. That would have been a waste. Instead, I played my role. The perfect husband. The oblivious fool. Because now, I wasn't just collecting proof, I was setting the stage. Over the next few days, I got what I needed. I checked our bank statements and found charges from hotels and restaurants I'd never been to. I logged into our shared phone plan and checked the call logs, dozens of late-night calls to the same unknown number. I went deeper, pulling data from our home Wi-Fi router, tracking every device that connected. His phone had been here, in my house. The final piece? Her laptop. She had changed the password, but she had forgotten one thing. I knew her. And I knew she was predictable. After a few tries, I got in. And there it was. Messages, emails, photos. Everything. I sat there, staring at the screen, reading message after message, each one a knife between the ribs. She didn't just cheat. She built a whole other life. The way she spoke to him, light, playful, eager, was the way she used to speak to me. The nicknames, the inside jokes, the casual intimacy of it all. I felt something dark settle inside me. But it wasn't sadness. It was something much colder, much more dangerous. I looked over at the bedroom, where Ashley slept peacefully, completely unaware that her entire world was about to collapse. She thought she was in control. She had no idea that I had just decided how the story ends. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the laptop screen in front of me, illuminating every disgusting word Ashley had written to him. The pet names. The secret plans. The whispered fantasies of a life where I didn't exist. It should have made me furious. It should have made me want to flip the table, wake her up, and throw every word back in her face. But I wasn't angry. No, anger was for men who let their emotions control them. I was something else now. Something colder. Something patient. Destroying her in a fit of rage would have been easy. Too easy. She'd expect anger, maybe even tears. That's what cheaters count on, emotional outbursts that make them feel like the victim. I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. No, I was going to do something much worse. I was going to let her destroy herself. And she was going to thank me for it, right up until the moment she realized there was no way out. I needed to hit her where it hurt the most. Not just financially, not just socially, but at the very core of who she was. And that meant understanding her weaknesses. Ashley prided herself on being adored. She fed off admiration, off the illusion that she was the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect woman. She built her whole world around appearances, her curated Instagram posts of our happy family, her carefully chosen words in front of friends, the way she manipulated every situation to make herself look good. So that's where I'd start. First, I needed her to believe she had one. I played my part flawlessly. I kept kissing her goodbye in the mornings. I sent her messages during the day, asking if she needed anything. I let her think everything was normal, that I was still the same clueless husband she had been fooling for months. And while she lived in that false comfort, I got to work. I went back through every financial detail. We had a shared savings account, investments, and assets under both our names. But she never paid much attention to the finances. That was always my job. So, I began shifting things. Quietly. Strategically. Moving investments into separate accounts, liquidating assets she didn't even know we had, redirecting funds into a trust under my name alone. It wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring that when the storm hit, she had nothing to fall back on. Then, I turned my attention to her reputation. Ashley loved to be admired, to be the golden girl in our social circle. So, I started planting seeds. Subtle ones. A few carefully crafted conversations with mutual friends, small comments about how she seemed distant lately, how I was worried about her. I never accused. I never implied anything drastic. Just enough to make people start watching her more closely. Because when someone believes they're being observed, they start making mistakes. But the real masterpiece? That came with her affair partner. I had everything on him, his name, his job, his schedule, even his family situation. And lucky for me, he wasn't just some random guy. He was married too. A well-respected business owner with a spotless public image. The kind of man who couldn't afford a scandal. I crafted an email. Simple. Direct. But not from me. From an anonymous source. A collection of screenshots from Ashley's messages, a few well-timed photos of their meetings, and just enough information to make it clear his life was about to unravel. I didn't send it yet. Timing was everything. I needed it to land when it would do the most damage. Ashley thought she had a future with him. That was her real weakness. She believed in the fantasy of it, in the idea that this wasn't just some fleeting affair but a real possibility. I needed her to hold on to that belief. So, I encouraged it. One evening, as we sat on the couch, I casually mentioned an upcoming work trip, one that didn't exist. I'll be gone for a few days, I told her, watching her closely. You should take some time for yourself. She hesitated, just for a second, then smiled, pretending to be indifferent. But I knew exactly what she was thinking. I left that Friday morning, but I didn't go far. I checked into a hotel, watching the tracker I had placed on her car. And sure enough, Within hours, she was at his house again. This time, I waited. I wanted them to feel safe, to get comfortable. Because when people think they're untouchable, they get reckless. The next morning, I sent the email to his wife. Within an hour, the storm began. Calls, messages, panic. His wife wasn't just furious, she was smart. She didn't just confront him. She exposed him. On social media. In their shared friend circles. By the time Ashley even realized what was happening, his entire life was in flames. And the best part? She had no idea I was the one who lit the match. By Sunday, he was begging her to stay away. He couldn't afford to be seen with her anymore. The fantasy she had clung to for months collapsed in an instant. And just like that, she was alone. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I came home that evening, acting completely normal. I let her sit with the weight of what had happened, let her feel the panic, the dread, the realization that her entire affair had just crumbled before her eyes. Then, I hit her with the final blow. That night, as we lay in bed, I turned to her and said, "Ashley, we need to talk." She stiffened. I could feel her heartbeat speed up. "I've been thinking a lot about us. About where we're going." She held her breath, waiting, praying I wasn't about to say what she feared most. Then, I smiled. The cruelest, coldest smile I had ever given her. "I think we should renew our vows." She didn't see the trap yet. But she would. She would. Ashley had no idea she was walking straight into her own ruin. That was the beauty of it. She thought she was salvaging what little control she had left, that she was holding on to a marriage that she could choose to leave when it suited her. What she didn't know was that I had already dismantled her world piece by piece. Every safety net she thought she had? Gone. Every secret she thought she was keeping? I had known them all before she even had the chance to lie about them. And now, I was going to watch her fall, helpless, exposed, with nowhere to run. The vow renewal idea had been a stroke of brilliance. The moment I said it, I saw her reaction, a flicker of hesitation, the quick processing of risk versus reward. She had just lost her affair partner, and now, here I was, handing her a way back into her perfect little facade. A fresh start. A chance to rebuild. She forced a smile, probably thinking she could use this as leverage to regain some ground. I'd love that, she said, voice just a little too bright. It was almost sad how predictable she was. The next few weeks were a carefully orchestrated masterpiece. I made sure she believed it was her idea, that she had convinced me to give her another chance. She threw herself into planning venue, invitations, the perfect guest list. She wanted a grand affair, something public and elegant, a way to reaffirm her status. That was the key. She needed witnesses. She needed an audience. And that was exactly what I was counting on. I made sure to play the devoted husband. I smiled at all the right moments, listened as she excitedly picked out decorations, agreed when she suggested we write personal vows this time. "Let's make it truly special," she had said, eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction. I almost laughed. Behind the scenes, I was tightening the noose. I secured the final touches of my plan. I had already taken care of the finances, quietly ensuring that her access to our assets was severed without her noticing. She wouldn't realize it until it was too late. The groundwork I had laid in our social circles was also in full effect, casual conversations with mutual friends, subtly dropping hints about Ashley feeling distant lately, planting the right seeds in the right minds. By the time of the ceremony, whispers about her would already be circulating. She just didn't know it yet. And then, there was the final piece, the perfect execution. The day of the vow renewal arrived, and Ashley was in her element. She wore an expensive, carefully chosen dress, the kind that screamed elegance and control. She floated around the venue, charming guests, basking in the glow of admiration. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect couple, two people reaffirming their love. No one saw the noose tightening around her neck. I stood at the altar, watching her walk toward me, a smile carefully painted on my face. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of knowing what was coming. The officiant welcomed everyone, and then it was time for the vows. Ashley went first. She had written something long, emotional, filled with well-practiced words about redemption and rebuilding trust. I listened, nodding, letting her have her moment. Then, it was my turn. I pulled out a small folded paper, cleared my throat, and began. "Ashley, when I asked you to renew our vows, it was because I believed in second chances. Because I thought the foundation of our love was strong enough to withstand anything." I paused, looking directly into her eyes. She was smiling, oblivious, caught up in her own self-importance. "But love, I continued, is built on trust. And trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair, no matter how carefully we try to hide the cracks. Her smile faltered. A flicker of confusion passed through her eyes. I turned toward the crowd. So today, I don't just want to reaffirm my vows. I want to share the truth of our love story. The whole truth. The venue fell into silence. The tension thickened. Ashley's breathing hitched. I pulled a small remote from my pocket and pressed the button. The screen behind us, meant for a slideshow of our beautiful journey together, flickered to life. But instead of wedding photos, instead of sweet memories, the first image was a screenshot. A message from her to him. Explicit. Undeniable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs. Ashley stiffened beside me, her face draining of color. Another click. A photo, her, leaving his house. Another click. A hotel reservation, under her name. Another. The message thread where she told him she was only staying with me long enough to figure things out financially. Ashley stumbled back a step. This isn't. I turned to her, my voice calm, controlled. I thought long and hard about what to say to you today. About whether you deserved a second chance. I looked at the audience, our friends, her family, people who had adored her, who had believed in her. But the truth is, Ashley, you made your choice. And now, so have I. I slipped off my wedding ring, held it up for a moment, and then let it fall to the ground. I won't be renewing my vows, I said, my voice echoing through the stunned silence. But I will be keeping one promise, to never let myself be fooled by you again. Ashley's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around, as if searching for support, but all she found were stares. Disbelief. Judgment. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some people were already walking away. Her parents stood frozen, her mother covering her mouth in shock. She reached for me. Please, we need to talk. I stepped back. No, Ashley. You need to face what you've done. And then, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the ruins of her perfect illusion, with nothing left but the wreckage of her own choices. Ashley stood there, frozen in place, her face a mask of disbelief and growing horror. The room around her, once filled with warm chatter and admiration, had turned into something else entirely, a courtroom of silent judgment. Every pair of eyes was locked on her, the weight of their stares crushing down like an avalanche. She opened her mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but no words came out. The shock had paralyzed her. I watched as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Her breathing became uneven, shallow. She turned toward her parents first, reaching for some kind of lifeline. Mom, Dad, this isn't. Her mother took a small step back, shaking her head, her lips pressed into a thin, pale line. Her father's face was unreadable, but the way he clenched his jaw told me everything. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. And somehow, that was worse. Her gaze darted around the room, desperate now. The friends who had spent years idolizing her, admiring her perfect marriage, were whispering among themselves, casting sidelong glances she couldn't ignore. The women she once confided in looked away, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The men who had once laughed at her jokes now stood with arms crossed, their expressions unreadable. She turned back to me, her voice finally finding strength. This isn't fair, she whispered, her breath shaky. Then, louder. You ambushed me. I tilted my head, my face carefully neutral. Ambushed you. I echoed, letting the words hang between us. Is that what this feels like? A betrayal? Her lips parted, but she had no answer. Funny. I continued, my voice calm, deliberate. Because that's exactly how it felt when I found out the truth. Except, unlike you, I didn't have the luxury of hiding behind lies. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't grief. This wasn't regret. This was panic. She had lost control, and she knew it. We can fix this, she pleaded, stepping toward me. I wasn't thinking, I made mistakes, but that doesn't mean we have to. Stop, I said, my tone sharp enough to cut through her sentence. You're not talking your way out of this, Ashley. Not this time. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between self-preservation and the realization that there was no exit, no escape. She had spent so much time weaving a perfect image, building a persona of loyalty and devotion, and now, in a matter of minutes, it had been torn apart in front of everyone she had ever sought validation from. Her breathing hitched. The panic was settling in deeper now, twisting its claws into her. She looked down at the wedding ring still on her hand, her fingers shaking as she touched it like it could somehow anchor her back to the life she had just lost. What do you want me to do? she whispered, voice cracking. I'll do anything. I exhaled slowly, letting her squirm in the silence. Then, with a steady voice, I said, you'll leave. She flinched. You'll walk out of here on your own, with your dignity still somewhat intact. Or, if you'd prefer, I can stay right here and let everyone continue to watch while you try to come up with excuses. Either way, I'm done. You don't get to stay in my life. You don't get to pretend. And you definitely don't get to rewrite this story. She shook her head rapidly. No, please. You chose this, Ashley. I cut in, my voice as steady as steel. You chose him. You chose to lie. And now, you get to live with those choices. I gestured toward the crowd, where her entire support system had begun to splinter apart. They see you now. The real you. So go ahead. Explain yourself. Tell them why you did it. Tell them why you risked everything for a man who dropped you the second his life got complicated. A fresh wave of humiliation washed over her, and I could see it in the way her shoulders sank, in the way her hands trembled as she clutched the fabric of her dress. She turned slightly, as if debating whether to fight or flee, and in that moment, she realized there was no fight left to win. The war had already been lost. Her lips trembled, and the tears finally spilled over. Not the kind that comes from heartbreak. The kind that comes when you realize you are truly alone. That the people you thought would stand by you no matter what have now seen too much to ever trust you again. She hesitated for another moment, as if still hoping for someone, anyone, to come to her defense. No one did. And then, without another word, she turned. She walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor, each step heavier than the last. The room remained silent long after she disappeared. Then, slowly, people began to move, murmuring among themselves, processing what had just happened. A few of my close friends clapped a hand on my shoulder, silent gestures of support. Her parents left without a word. Some people just shook their heads and left, the illusion of Ashley they had known now permanently shattered. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The weight of it, the finality of it. And then, I walked outside, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. It felt lighter somehow, cleaner, like I had just taken the first real breath in months. Ashley had spent so long trying to control the narrative, trying to keep all her secrets buried under layers of deception. But in the end, there was one truth she could never escape. You can't manipulate people into loving you once they've seen who you really are. After that night, the world felt quieter, lighter. It was as if I had finally removed a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. But for Ashley, things were only beginning to unravel. She disappeared from sight almost immediately after the public humiliation. At first, she simply stopped responding to people. Her phone, once constantly buzzing with calls and messages, fell eerily silent. Maybe she thought if she just kept her head down, the storm would pass. But it didn't. It only grew stronger. I didn't need to actively destroy her reputation. I simply let people come to their own conclusions. People want to know the truth. They want a scandal. All I did was place the right information in the right hands. A few mutual acquaintances, women who had once envied Ashley's perfect life, received fragments of her messages. A few of our mutual friends saw photos of her slipping in and out of her lover's house. And most importantly, her employer, a small but reputable interior design firm, caught wind of how she had been spending her working hours. She lost her job within a week. The official reason? Failure to uphold company values. The real reason? Her personal scandal had made its way into professional circles. Clients didn't want to be associated with someone who had publicly shattered her own marriage. Her friends? They started dropping one by one. It turned out that many of them were only around because they admired the image she projected, Ashley, the devoted wife, the charming socialite, the woman who had it all. But now? Now she was nothing more than a disgraced, untrustworthy mess. Women she used to confide in began avoiding her. Invitations stopped coming. She became the woman people whispered about but never invited. And her family? Her father hadn't spoken a single word to her since the night I exposed her. Her mother, on the other hand, had called me multiple times, urging me to not be so cruel, as if I had been the one who had destroyed everything. But even she couldn't deny the truth. Her daughter had burned her own life to the ground. As for her affair partner, he made his decision quickly. When his wife found out, she didn't just file for divorce, she made sure everyone knew exactly why. His clean-cut business reputation was shattered, his family gone. And like any weak man caught in his own mess, He did the only thing that could salvage a piece of his reputation. He threw Ashley under the bus. A mistake. He had called their affair a lapse in judgment. He cut off all contact with her, leaving her with nothing. The cruelest irony? She couldn't even turn to me for comfort. She knew I wasn't her safety net anymore. Meanwhile, I wasn't just moving on, I was thriving. Financially, I was untouchable. I had already secured our assets long before she even realized what was happening. By the time she finally checked our accounts, she found that she had access to nothing. The house? Mine. The car? Mine. Everything she had once relied on? Already legally out of her reach. She tried calling me, just once. It was late at night, days after the disaster, when I finally saw her name flash on my screen. I wasn't surprised. Her voice was weak, broken, almost unrecognizable from the confident woman she used to be. I have nowhere to go, she whispered. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, let her sit in the weight of what she had done. That's not my problem, Ashley, I finally said, my voice calm, detached. You made your choice. Now live with it. Please. It was the first time I had ever heard her beg. But there was no true remorse in her voice. Only fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being truly alone. Goodbye, Ashley, I said. And then I hung up. I don't know where she went after that. And I didn't care. For me, this story was over. As for me, my kids stayed with me. I built a better life, free of deception, free of betrayal. I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't let this define me. If anything, it only gave me more clarity, more control. And you know what? I won. Months passed, and Ashley became nothing more than a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered among the people who once admired her. I didn't keep tabs on her. I didn't need to. Every now and then, I'd hear something, a mutual friend mentioning how she had moved out of town, how she was struggling to find stable work, how her attempts to rebuild her social life kept falling apart because no one trusted her anymore. But by then, it didn't matter. She wasn't my concern. She wasn't even a thought. My life, on the other hand, was better than ever. I had restructured everything, not just financially but emotionally. I had taken back control and it showed. I felt lighter, sharper. I didn't carry around bitterness. I carried clarity. I was the one who walked away intact, while she was left grasping at the ruins of a life she had set on fire with her own hands. One evening, I was at a cafe when an old acquaintance, someone who had been at the vow renewal disaster, approached me. He hesitated for a moment, then finally said, "Man, I still can't believe what happened. I mean, the way you handled it. It was brutal. But honestly, she deserved every second of it." I smiled, taking a sip of my coffee before replying. It wasn't about being brutal, I said. It was about making sure she understood one simple truth: betrayal has consequences. He nodded, exhaling as if he was reliving the moment. Most guys would have just screamed at her, thrown her out, or tried to hurt the guy. But you? You played the long game. He chuckled, shaking his head. Cold. Calculated. Genius. I simply shrugged. Anger fades. Regret lingers. And that was the difference. Had I reacted in a fit of rage, she would have walked away feeling like the victim. But by letting her destroy herself, by making her believe she still had control right up until the moment it was ripped away, I ensured that her downfall wasn't just painful, it was permanent. I left the cafe feeling satisfied, but as I walked back to my car, a question kept circling in my mind. A thought I had pushed away for months, but one that now felt worth considering. What if I had never checked her phone that day? What if I had ignored the little signs, brushed them off as paranoia? Would she still be living her double life? Would I still be the fool in the dark, oblivious to what was happening behind my back? Or worse, what if I had found out, but done nothing? What if I had let her lie, let her manipulate me into forgiving her, into working things out, while she continued to betray me in secret? I knew the answer. I had seen men take that route before, convincing themselves that ignorance was easier, that pretending things could go back to normal was somehow the right choice. But I also knew what happened to those men. They didn't win. They didn't get justice. They lived in quiet misery, trapped in a marriage where they knew, deep down, that their partner didn't respect them. That was never going to be me. But now, I have to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have exposed her like I did? Would you have walked away in silence? Or would you have given her another chance, knowing what she was capable of? Tell me, because I wonder how many people are living my story right now and don't even know it yet.